so that I will trust that I'm live. As a guy that's 50 and who's going to be 51 this year, I have to make peace with the fact that I'm long past the age that statistically I'm probably not going to do anything super fantastic that makes a great, great impact on the world in music, in art, in science, in literature. It's true. Statistically, people like Albert Einstein, great sports people, people in the arts, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, the Beatles. Pick a scene, pick a field. The people that make great impacts and have done great things have generally done them between the ages of 25 and 35. If you haven't done something amazing, there are, exceptions, Grandma Moses, people that all of a sudden out of nowhere did something, rock solid later on in life. There are some exceptions, Jonah for one. But for the most part, when you arrive at certain stages in life, the race has been run. You know what I mean? It's just the way that it goes. It also is the fact that, for the most part, people that we associate with greatness have usually done the great things that they're known for early on. And if they continue on, generally, it's just it's just sadness. It's really just, you know, characterize it as you will, beating a dead horse, overstaying your welcome. Often it's said that the tragedy of people like, James Dean or Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix dying young is it's tragic that they died young. However, it's often said that because they died young, we never got to see the travesty of them staying on too long and doing, the 55th terrible album that just is the worst and just degrades any precious memories you had of them in their prime. Sometimes it takes a slow burn to get the ball rolling. The Beatles have Meet the Beatles, but then they hit it. But then after they hit it, hey, I have some favorites among the John Lennon solo records. Hey, Paul McCartney did some great pop tunes with Wings, but we all know that the great stuff they did is the great stuff they did at a certain point. Stephen King, fantastic writer. People have, there are people that are huge fans of it. Not to take anything away from it, but it's generally agreed if Stephen King has a masterpiece, it's generally agreed that that masterpiece is The Stand. The Stand is, if I'm not mistaken, like one of the first or second books the dude ever published. And if you look at what Stephen King does now, it's, we're really just, Edgar Allan Poe died, I think, before he was like 30. I don't know, you know what I mean? Albert Einstein equals MC squared, the theory of relativity. That guy, that was early on. But we're here to talk about Chapterhouse Dune. Dune, say hello to Tim Frey. Some people say it's the greatest science fiction book of all time. Some say it's the most over celebrated science fiction book of all time. It's my favorite book of all time. I've read it at least 3 or 4 times. It's like that sometimes, Tim. Um, There are 6 books written by Frank Herbert over the course of basically 20 years. Say hello to Bucky. Um, Afterwards, Brian Herbert, his son, has written about 25 books in the same amount of time that Frank Sr., Frank wrote 6 books. But Chapterhouse is the last book in the original canonical series. The first book, Dune, I believe, came out in 64, 65. Chapterhouse Dune came out in 85, the full 20 years after the initial book. When people talk about the brilliance of Frank Herbert's Dune series, for the most part, they're really talking about Dune. When people really tell people to read Frank Herbert's Dune, they're telling people to read Frank Herbert's Dune. And then if you get the fever for the flavor of the spice, then you might go on and read the second and the third, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune. But you can even tell the way that they're packaged. You'll often see the first 3 books packaged together, and then you might see a packaging of all 6 books together. But the point is, like the rings of Saturn, the further away you get from Dune, the further you get away from Dune. Dune is a masterpiece, and Dune was Frank Herbert's, I believe, first book published. When people talk about Frank Herbert, they talk about Dune. Frank Herbert wrote other books. Frank Herbert has fans, and those fans, because they can't get enough of Frank Herbert, read The Lazarus Effect, The White Plague. But it's like the Pareto distribution. 90% of people who read a Frank Herbert book are going to read Dune. And then, like a golden ratio, a certain percentage are going to read the other Dune books, and then the smallest percentage of people are going to read those other Frank Herbert books. The first book he ever wrote was the most important book he ever wrote, and the book that he's famous for. And he spent the next 20 years of his life still writing and publishing. The last book that he wrote, and remember, I said Dune is my favorite book of all time. I've read this book more than I've read any other book. I regard it, and I tell people that I regard it, essentially as a spiritual text. I don't think Frank Herbert has to feel like a douchebag because the most important book that he wrote is the first book that he got published, and he spent 20 years left on planet Earth, being in love with a woman, having 2 kids, and writing some other shit. A lot of which was, I'm not, saying that the other books like bone, suck. But we do things with our lives, and not everything. People wanted more Dune. And over the course of 20 years, he gave them 6 more books. The last book that he wrote before he died was Chapterhouse Dune. I love this book. I just finished this book, and I can tell you there's not anything that I like about this book. I'm going to tell you what I don't like about this book. Spoiler alerts. I'm not playing a game of no spoilers. This is a review-free, spoiler-free review. I don't have the tools or the talent. I'm not a book reviewer. I'm just a dude talking. If you've read Chapterhouse Dune, or if you know intention of reading Chapterhouse Dune, come on and enjoy this. Plan D, we say hello to you as well. The book is not terrible. I'm glad that I've read Chapterhouse Dune and have read the last book that Frank Herbert, the guy that gave me my favorite book of all time, wrote. But it in no way, shape, or form reflects the brilliance of Dune. Not that it has to, right? George Lucas wrote and directed Star Wars. George Lucas wrote but didn't direct Empire Strikes Back. He came back and did Return of the Jedi with the Ewoks. Hey. And then he came back and did those prequel movies, right? God bless George Lucas. People wanted more Star. Give us more Star Wars. Be careful what you ask for, because you just might get the old guy to come back and do it again. But you can get the old band back together again, but you can't make them go back in time. Chapterhouse Dune, written by a man over the course of time, may very well have been knowing that his time on planet Earth was running out. We know that between the first Dune book and the second Dune book, like almost a decade had passed, I believe. Between this book and the book that came right before it, only a year had passed. So the guy seems to have been moving with some speed, probably knowing that his time on planet Earth was going. His wife had just passed, and we have a lovely passing tribute to her at the end of this book. We also have what seems to be a rather obvious self-insert of him and his old lady in the form of these two cosmic characters, Danny and Marty? I will admit that I read these books out of order. I didn't read the book that came before this one. Don't ask me why, it doesn't matter. I read books out of order. I read them for my own personal reasons. Don't worry about it. You know, Alfred Hitchcock in his movies would always appear as a little thing, would appear in all of his movies. But when Alfred Hitchcock appeared in all of his movies, he'd be like a guy on the train, a guy walking past the car window, diner patron. So if you blinked, you might miss him. But if you're a real cinephile, you could be like to your friend, hey, look, there's Alfred Hitchcock. It's one thing to place yourself like that in your movies. Hey, look, there I am. I'm Alfred Hitchcock. It's another thing to put you and your old lady as essentially who you are, two old-fashioned, all-American shmoos as these cosmic entities at the end of space and time. Look, if you're Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett and your whole thing is, we're wacky English gentlemen and our books reflect the same, that's one thing. But if you're Dune, and up to this point, we've been in cosmic space opera town, then it makes no sense to me that all of a sudden we've got two old fogies at the end of the space-time continuum plucking roses and wondering what they're going to do with the main characters. And true, it's his book to write, and he can write whatever the heck he wants. But then again, that sort of justification can lead you to him being able to say, and then all of a sudden, Superman shows up. It is what it is. Also, it seems to me that the dude likes strong and powerful women. Fantastic. But it also seems like at the tail end of the man's life cycle, I think he lost track of the number of chicks in the book. Because there's a lot of ladies that are introduced, and I don't know exactly what was going on with all of them. Also, uh, my main man Duncan Idaho is having sex with some lady on a ship, and there's reference made to her current pregnancy, which leads me to believe, and there was another part which led me to believe that she was having several children with this dude, but it's never really mentioned. Like, I don't, it's never really clear to me whether these births are coming to term, or whether these like births are these pregnancies are unsuccessful and they're waiting for this current one to be successful, or this latest one to be successful, and or if they are successful, what they're doing with these babies. Maybe I missed something. It's a big book. And hey, I'm not the world's most brilliant guy. You know what I mean? Like maybe I failed to pay attention or something. Also, there's a lot of criticisms of a lot of anime for like, oh, I'm not a pervert because she may look like she's 13, but she actually is in fact 5,000 years old. I don't think people like to talk about this because no one wants to talk about this. The Gola of Miles Tig is clearly a child. The Gola has to regain his memories to remember that he's the great Bashar, Miles Tig. The way they do that is by a tantric sex ritual. There's no way to change it. That involves a tantric sex ritual with a child. Are we, you know what I mean? It's like in every you can see people talk about the weird sex stuff in Stephen King's It on Wikipedia and on Reddit, but every video you see on YouTube, they just don't talk about it. And it's like people are comfortable writing about stuff, but they're not comfortable talking about it. So the guy, my favorite undercover brother, Quinn, did a whole thing on Chapterhouse Dune. He just doesn't talk about that part. I'll blow it out. Frank Herbert talks about, doing the act with kids, but it's cool, right? Oh, by the way, Arthur C. Clarke is a self-admitted PDF file. You don't have to do this whole elaborate thing of going through the Vice article and trying to figure out what the names. He admitted it or knew, Rupert Murdoch buried this one article. He admitted it in an interview. Arthur C. Clarke was a PDF file. Deal with it. I'm not saying anything about Frank Herbert other than he wrote this in a book. And then, by the way, after the Gola wakes up, he's still in the body of a kid, and he still rides around a la like Robert Crumb on the shoulders of a chick. That's fine. Whatever, dude. It's still weird. It's still weird. You know what I mean? And the whole thing doesn't. Oh, and then also, here's the other thing. Oh, because I have to say it before we talk about it, I'm Jewish. Though I'm not Jewish enough for the state of Israel, I don't get to go back home because the wrong parent of mine is Jewish. I was Jewish enough for the Reformed Council to allow me to have a bar mitzvah, but because the wrong parent of mine was Jewish, I'm not allowed to go back to a certain country. Jews in space. I get it. In Dune, there's clearly references to, certain cultures so we can get and understand that these people are like these people so that we can, have like kind of reference points and understand what it's like. Ironically, when I first read Dune, I was in Israel. My brother had his bar mitzvah in Israel. We traveled there so he could have his bar mitzvah in the Holy Land. Though we couldn't get citizenship there. He was able to have his bar mitzvah there. So believe you me, it was an eye-opening experience to read Dune in the Holy Land. I read parts of Dune on Mount Masada. Right? It was a trip in many ways. But then you get to Chapterhouse Dune, and they literally have the tribe of Israel, Jews, in space. They've survived all this time. Everything else, everyone else gets, hither and yon from Earth civilization. Parts of it, Zenzuni, we get it. It gets absorbed into the Orange Catholic Bible. We understand that they speak a language that's sort of like English, but it's not English. Yet, we're led to believe that after what must be untold millennium, the Jews are still together as a culture, still doing spy, sneaky shit, right? It took me right out of it because in Chapterhouse Dune, also, these we've had people, because of they're able to absorb other people's memories and other people's memories over lifetimes. In past Dune books, we've seen them have memories and recall memories, yes, of generations back, and they have recollections, even going back to Earth. Fair enough. But we understand that their memories going back to Earth are not just to the 20th and 21st century. There's no reason for them to remember the 20th and 21st century because we understand that there was the 30th and the 35th century and the 50th century on planet Earth before they all went into space. And beyond that, there's millennium and millennium and millennium and millennium after people have left Earth. But in Chapterhouse Dune, every time these bitches recall the past, the only thing they seem to ever be able to remember is the late 19th and early 20th century. Paintings by Rembrandt or some other classical painter, impressionist painter. Poems, writings of Shakespeare. What the fuck? Why would they remember that shit, right? Of all the hundreds of thousands of millions of years of memory that they could bring back and recall that could be pertinent to them, they're remembering shit from the 20th century? Like I said, I would love to have loved Chapterhouse Dune. But the fact remains, Frank Herbert's, I think, masterpiece was you get to do one masterpiece, maybe two, right? My favorite bands, you want every album to be a winner? They're not. I love Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden's first 4 or 5 records are the great Iron Maiden records, and they were all done by 86, 87. It was a wrap. Ever since then, they've been releasing record after record after record after record. They're abominations. They're just they're it's not that there's not a one or good song on these albums, but they're more or less pointless. Metallica have one or two, three maybe tops good albums. And then there's just they're doing it. God bless them. I guess everyone's got to eat, everyone's got to live. Chapterhouse Dune was written. It's a book that exists. Would I ever recommend it to anybody? I don't think there's any real. I don't think it answers any questions. I don't think it resolves anything. I'll read the other ones and I'll give reviews of those ones. But as far as I'm concerned, if there's six books in this series, at this point, I would say I haven't read all of them. But I would be have no problem telling people at this point. I would say it's an open question to me about whether you could read one through five and leave six off. You could just totally leave six off. I guess if you read one through five, you would say to yourself, well, why wouldn't I read six? But it ends on a cliffhanger, and it ends on a ridiculous cliffhanger with, like I said, these two old folks being like clipping roses and being like, are they face dancers? Are they this? Are they that? What does it matter? They're just two old farts at the end of space time continuum plucking roses. I don't think there's anything fucking brilliant about this book. I think it's an old guy. You know what I mean? It's not, and that's it's okay. It's okay to be like I said. I've never written a book like Frank Herbert's Dune. I don't think I'm ever going to write a book like Frank Herbert's Dune. I got the opportunity to read Frank Herbert's Dune, and I consider myself better for it. For better for having read this dude's work, right? So So I'm not going to say that this takes anything away from that. I'm just saying that it's not like I'll never say like everything that this dude wrote you got to read. I don't think you got to read this book. I think this book fucking sucks. It just makes no sense to me. It's like choosing space. These people keep on remembering the late 19th and early 20th century for no fucking reason. They're these. It is what it is. People are getting pregnant for all these reasons. You don't know what happens to the babies. You know what I mean? And really, it's like, I get it. You love your wife. She was your world. So it's you and her at the end of space and time being like, this is the world we made. And people can be all like, you see, isn't it beautiful? He's basically saying, oh, it's, chitty chitty bang bang. Now you can make up your own world. I don't think this. I think it's just she was dead. He knew he was going to die, and I think he thought at this point that he was writing. I think he knew he was writing genre fiction, science fiction books, and he was like, "Fuck it." You know what I mean? I love my old lady. Life is pointless without her. You know what I mean? Here's my homage to her at the end of Chapterhouse Dune. I'm dying. Fuck it. And I think he had no idea his son. Also, yeah, have I read other books? I've read Paul. I've read Paul of Dune. Don't ask me why. I'm this far through the Butlerian Jihad, and I'm also read. I've read part. I read books out of order. Don't ask me why. I've also read Mentats. Dude, the books that the kid wrote just are just. It's like the other Star Wars shows. It's like new Metallica records, new Slayer records. You know what I mean? This was so good. I want more of this. Right? You got to find you got to realize that you can only graduate high school one time. You can only lose your virginity one time. You can only, have this first concert experience one time. You can't go back home again. You can buy the new Stephen King book, but it's not going to be like the Stephen King book you read when you were in high school. It's not going to be The Stand. It's going to suck. Most likely. I don't know. Prove me wrong, Stephen King. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. And that's okay. Because Dune is still Dune. And people still love Dune. And I've got all the Dune books. Some of them I've read, some of them I've yet to read, and I'm going to read them all. Even though I'm probably at a point in my life where I'm going to say, if Brian keeps on writing shit with the other dude, I might say, yo, enough. I'm not gonna keep on. If you keep on writing stuff post 2026, there's a cutoff. I'm not letting this madness go on forever. I'll take that recommendation, Bucky. I'll put it on the to-do list. But there you go. Chapterhouse Dune. Does it complete the cycle? Is it part of the cycle? It's part of the cycle. It's part of the Dune books. It's part of the six original Dune books that Frank Herbert wrote. I read it. I finished it. I realized it wasn't Dune. Duncan Idaho. You can keep on bringing Duncan Idaho back from the dead. I can keep on waffling on, but I think I've said what I've had to say. These chicks remembering the late 20th century, late 19th century, and early 20th century busted the immersion for me. It made no sense to me why these chicks would be always constantly remembering the late 19th century, early 20th century. Made no sense to me. Other than Frank Herbert's, kind of run out of shit to say and is like kind of, I guess, reflecting on his own life. These people, this kid, all of a sudden becoming this master general didn't really make a lot of sense to me either. It is what it is. Also seemed weird that he was riding around on the back of this other lady's head, neck. It's weird shit. And then I'm going to be the guy that talks about. I'm going to say, having sex with kids. That's weird. I'm not trying to be prude, but I'm going to be the one guy that actually says it. People cannot, they don't want to say it. I'll tell you why they don't want to say it. They don't want to say it because they don't want normies to know about it. They think that no one's going to know about it. Once you read it, only the hardcore are going to get the Chapterhouse Dune. So then you read it and you'll be like, just don't talk about it. No, I'm going to talk about it. Frank Herbert wrote about that. He included stuff like that too. Also, he was a conservative guy. He's a Republican. He's obviously a Republican, libertarian, some sort of weird guy. So it's, you know what I mean? So it's not like you blame him for being a hippie or whatever. You know? It is what it is. Hey! Got nothing but love for the dude. Got nothing but love for the brother. Loved his wife. God bless him. Had 2 kids. One of them died of AIDS. You wonder if that kid didn't die of AIDS, if he'd write books too, like his brother would be like, hey man, fuck this. It is what it is. Anywho, apropos of nothing. From 2002, the Gothic Tarot. The Gothic Tarot. Apropos of nothing. There's a new Tarot deck to fit in with the new Dune movies. Of course, there's actually a Tarot deck in Dune. There's a Dune Tarot deck, right? In Dune, there's a special Tarot deck that they use. So you figure that's a great opportunity to create an actual, unique Dune Tarot deck. Do your research and try and have a group of people to get together and create a Dune Tarot deck. That's, something that the adherents of the religion of Muad'Dib would create and use, right? Did they do that? No. Look at the biography of the Hobag, the total new age Hobag that wrote the actual the Dune Tarot, which is absolutely a traditional run of the mill tarot deck that's just infused with Frank Herbert's Dune. No, it's all from the movies. It's all imagery from the movies, all inspired by the movies. Read her biography. It's all, I'm a Capricornius, moon rising Aquarius, and the descendant of this. I'm like, whatever, dude. Whatever, dude. The magician. The magician. Number one of the Trumps. What was the first book? Dune. It created a world. And if we look at it for a Kabbalistic analogy, from the one, emanations come. And those emanations fall to earth. And as those emanations fall to earth, they become more and more, for want of a better term, distorted a little, impure, touched and mixed to this worldly reality, distinct from the initial invocation and intentions that were meant to be. The product of a man in his youth and touched by his initial inspiration. The work of a man, perchance very aware that he was out of steam and about to die. Dune is a masterpiece. That's what I say. That's what many say. Though many say it's overrated. Hey, you can't make all the people happy all the time. But there's no one that I've ever heard say, you know, if you're going to read the Dune books, forget about Dune. The best Dune book is one of these other Dune books. No, it's from Dune and what Dune means to people that people's need keeps on arising to say, we need more. Like a Fremen willing to wear a suit that recycles their own piss, shit, and sweat to squeeze out any more water. People will always want to squeeze more spice from this bloom. Baby Grogu. I love you, I love you, I love you. If nobody told you they loved you today, somebody just did. That somebody is CW Chanter. Make of that what you will. You already will. I'll catch you on the next one. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things. They're trying to shut us down. Chapterhouse Dune. Make a trend. Till next time, brothers and sisters. Till next time.